Sue Bird isn't pulling punches. She's calling out a structural crisis inside the WNBA, one that's been festering beneath the surface. Top players and union leaders who are also founding rival leagues like Unrivaled and Project B. That dual role isn't just problematic, it's a textbook conflict of interest.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Bird's concern is clear. The people tasked with negotiating better conditions for WNBA athletes are also quietly building platforms that compete with it as those leagues ramp up their presence, offering better pay and independent media attention. The integrity of collective bargaining and cohesion of the WNBA are both at risk. This isn't just a philosophical debate about loyalty. It's a practical reckoning about power and structure. Bird's message is that without immediate, transparent leadership reform, the WNBA won't be negotiating from strength. It'll be watching its foundation fracture. If the league's most visible advocates are building exits instead of solutions, it signals a dangerous future where short-term profit overrides long-term stability. The sustainability of women's basketball depends not on which league can pay more, but on whether leadership can be trusted to prioritize the game over their own side ventures. Sue Bird did not hold back. In a move that's already sending shockwaves across the WNBA landscape, one of the league's most respected voices has stepped into the chaos, and she's naming names. With a warning shot aimed directly at players like Sophie Cunningham Lexie, Sue Bird publicly called out what she sees as an existential threat to the league. Conflict of interest, fractured loyalties, and a rising wave of players building rival leagues from within. This isn't just a spicy take. It's a full-blown reckoning with the messy reality of what's happening behind the curtain. And the timing couldn't be more critical. The WNBA is already under pressure. Expansion plans are in the works. Viewership is climbing. Sponsors are finally showing up. But behind all that, the league is being pulled apart by forces that go deeper than dollars. Sue Bird is saying the quiet part out loud. The league's leadership has a conflict of interest crisis. And if something doesn't change, the WNBA could lose everything it's worked. Unrivaled league. Let's get right into it. Sue Bird is calling out the fact that current players, some of whom hold leadership roles in the union, are simultaneously launching competing leagues. Specifically, she's pointing efforts like Unrivaled and Project B. These aren't just off-season pickup games. They're fully fledged business ventures meant to rival the WNBA's grip on media attention, sponsorships, and player. And here's where it crosses a line. These same players are also supposed to be negotiating with the WNBA for better salaries and working conditions. But how can they do that in good faith when they're also building a competing product behind the scenes? That's the problem Bird is laying bare. You can't wear two hats in this game. You can't sit in the boardroom with the WNBA, demanding more money for players, while also plotting a rival league that plans to poach those very same players and their endorsements. It's not leadership. It's self-interest. And it's compromising the integrity of the entire league. Bird's frustration doesn't come out of nowhere. She's watching the house she helped build being chipped away, not just from outside competitors, but from the inside. And players like Cunningham and Hull are now in the spotlight, not just for their involvement, but for what their involvement represents. A growing shift in loyalty. Unrivaled league, Sue Bird says it outright. The loyalty these days is to money, not the league, not even the sport. It's harsh. It's uncomfortable. But it's true. Players are signing with new leagues. They're chasing bigger paydays. They're cutting deals outside of the WNBA's platform. And in doing so, they're weakening the league's negotiating power. The WNBA's top talent is no longer automatically committed to the WNBA. And once that sense of exclusivity goes, so does the leverage. Bird is warning that this shift could collapse everything the league has been building. Because while rival leagues might seem like a fun alternative or even a necessary challenge to the system, they're not just options. They're competition. And this isn't just about players having more choices. It's about destabilizing the one platform that currently has national media rights, sponsorship infrastructure, and cultural compilation. The WNBA's value isn't just in the games. It's in its access to American TV, endorsement pipelines, and corporate backing. Bird says it straight. The WNBA's worth is directly tied to perception that it's the main stage for women's basketball. But when stars start pulling attention elsewhere, the league risks becoming one of many instead of the one. That shift is already happening. Players have long gone overseas for higher pay, but those leagues didn't threaten the WNBA's core identity. They existed in a different market, with less visibility. What's different now is that these rival leagues are being built by WNBA players themselves, on American soil, using American press cycles, and going after the same fan base and the same sponsors. This isn't friendly competition. This is business warfare. And the worst part? It's being led by the very people tasked with protecting the WNBA's interests. Bird isn't saying players don't deserve more money. She's not denying that the system needs improvement. What she's calling out is the hypocrisy and structural instability of players simultaneously negotiating with the league and building alternatives behind its back. It's not just a betrayal of trust. It's a blueprint for... She's also put out the elephant in the room, all the talk about equity, justice, and empowerment that these rival leagues love to promote is often just a mask for profit-driven moves. It's branding. It's smart PR. But when you strip it down, it's about money. That's not inherently wrong. But let's not pretend it's altruistic. These ventures aren't purely about uplifting the game or giving players more voice. They're business models, and they come at the WNBA's expense. And when union leaders themselves are tangled up in those ventures, the situation gets even more compromised. Bird's message is clear. If the people negotiating with the league have skin in the game elsewhere, they can't be trusted to prioritize the WNBA's future. So when she says players like Sophie Cunningham and Lexie should be fired, she's not being petty. She's drawing a line. She's saying if you're actively working to build something that directly undermines your current employer, you should no longer benefit from that employer's platform. That's not personal. It's about accountability. The WNBA is at a turning point. If leadership doesn't step in, establish clear ethical boundaries, and address the growing split in priorities, the league risks losing everything it's worked for: the media deals, the fan trust, the cultural relevance. It doesn't take much for a rising league to fall off, and once the momentum's gone, it's twice as hard to get back. This isn't alarmist. This is a real, present threat. What Sue Bird is doing, whether you agree with every word or not, is sounding an alarm. She's challenging the league, the fans, and the players to have a real conversation about loyalty, money, and the messy power dynamics driving women's sports right. Compilation 2. It's not enough to talk about growth. The league has to protect itself, legally, financially, and culturally. And that means taking a hard look at who's leading from within. There's no version of the WNBA's future where it survives if its own stars are building the escape hatch while still cashing WNBA checks. It's not sustainable, it's not fair, and it's not leadership. Tell us what you think. Should players involved in rival leagues be allowed to hold leadership roles in the WNBA? Are they helping evolve the game, or are they tearing apart from the inside? Sound off in the comments. Hit that like button if you're here for real accountability. And subscribe if you want the truth behind every twist, every scandal, and every moment the sports world tries to sweep under the rug. Because this conversation, it's just getting started. Unrivaled league, and now, with the entire league watching, the questions only get messier. Sue Bird isn't just voicing a personal gripe. She's cracking open a reality the WNBA has been hesitant to fully confront. You cannot preserve a league's integrity when its most powerful players are straddling both sides of the table. This is no longer a hypothetical debate about off-season opportunities. It's about what happens when the structure of a league starts eating itself from within. Let's call it what it is. Project B and Unrivaled aren't side hustles. They are direct competition. They're being pitched to the same media outlets, the same sponsors, and even the same fans who have loyally supported the WNBA through decades of underfunding and overpromising. These new leagues are shiny, player-owned, and marketed with the same social justice gloss that helped the WNBA build its current identity. But Sue Bird is looking past the branding and calling it exactly what it is: economic opportunism. And there's nothing wrong with players wanting to get paid. They should be getting more money. That's part of what makes this so complicated. But Bird is saying you don't fix a broken system by tearing down the only infrastructure that's even halfway working. You fix it by strengthening it, from within, not by playing both sides and pretending the sabotage is just progress. Because that's the con. Players involved in these rival ventures are positioning themselves as visionaries, as disruptors, as the next evolution of women's basketball. But what they're not saying, at least not publicly, is that their success requires the WNBA to fail, or at the very least to... That's the tension Bird is calling out. You don't get to call yourself a leader in the WNBA while actively building a business designed to make it obsolete. That's not innovation. That's a conflict of interest. And when that conflict is coming from players in union leadership, that's catastrophic. Because how do you negotiate in good faith for the future of the league when your personal business model benefits if the league stagnates? You don't. It's a textbook contradiction. You're sitting at the negotiating table while holding a blueprint for an escape route. And if the CBA stalls, if trust breaks down, if the league fails to improve, that just makes your rival league more attractive. It's the definition of misaligned incentives. And fans are starting to notice. There's already confusion. There's skepticism. When fans hear union leaders say they want better travel, better pay, better conditions, but then watch those same leaders invest their time and energy into a separate league, the whole movement starts to feel performative. Like the fight for better conditions isn't really about collective progress. It's about building leverage. And when that happens, the trust evaporates. This is where Sue Bird's criticism cuts the deepest. She's not accusing anyone of being evil. She's not vilifying ambition. What she's saying is that the WNBA is at a fragile, critical point, and cannot afford leaders who treat it like a backup plan, especially not when they're the ones tasked with protecting it. This is a new idea in sports. Conflict of interest is a poison, and when it's left unchecked, it eventually undermines everything. Fan loyalty, brand stability, sponsorship confidence, and team cohesion. It breeds distrust. And that's where we're headed fast. The worst part? The silence. Bird hints that the real problem isn't just a conflict. It's the fact that no one wants to talk about it. Not the league. Not the union. Not the media covering them. Everyone's too afraid to look under the rug because what they'll find isn't easy to explain or easy to fix. The WNBA wants to protect its image. The union wants to protect its power. The players in both leagues want to protect their money. And caught in the middle are fans, loyal, dedicated, and confused about what's really going on. Because from the outside, it all starts to look murky. Is the fight for change in the WNBA real? Or is it a stepping stone toward building private empires? Are players being empowered, or just being used to drive hype for competing products? Bird doesn't answer those questions. She doesn't need to. Her message is simpler. Leadership requires accountability. And if players like Sophie Cunningham and Lexie are serious about leading, they need to choose a compilation. You don't get to be both the firefighter and the arsonist. You don't get to collect a WNBA check while laying the foundation for its competition. That's not a leadership model. That's brand erosion in slow motion. And if the league doesn't address it, the fans eventually will. Because fans care about more than box scores. They care about what they're supporting. They want to believe in the product, in the mission, in the leadership. They want to know their dollars and their time are going towards something sustainable, something that values transparency, commitment, and long-term growth. That's why this scandal hits differently. It's not about one or two players. It's about a cultural fracture at the heart of the league. Bird is warning that the WNBA's biggest threat isn't outside competition. It's internal disloyalty. And until the league draws a line between leadership and competition, things will only get worse. The league has always prided itself on being player-driven, on empowering its stars to speak out, organize, and lead. But when that empowerment turns into personal leverage, and that leverage becomes a business plan that depends on destabilizing the very system it's built on, then it stops being leadership and starts becoming sabotage. And this is the moment to decide. Is the WNBA going to hold its leaders accountable? Or will it pretend the conflict doesn't exist until it's too late? Because here's the truth. Rival leagues aren't going anywhere. They're gaining momentum. They're attracting talent. And they're going to keep pushing. If the WNBA doesn't address these conflicts directly, if it doesn't demand clear lines of loyalty from the people in power, then it won't be a league leading the movement. It'll be a brand slowly bleeding out while pretending everything's fine. Sue Bird has seen enough to know how this ends. She's not calling people out because she's angry. She's doing it because she understands how fragile this moment really is, and because she's trying to preserve what she spent her entire career helping build. It's a hard truth, but she's forcing the conversation. You can't build a future while rooting for the collapse of your present. You can't lead a league while holding a stake in its downfall. It's time for clarity. 2. The temperature inside the WNBA right now? Boiling. And it's not because of what's happening on the court. It's what's bubbling beneath it. Sue Bird didn't just start a conversation. She detonated a truth bomb that the league has spent the last year quietly sidestepping. The people steering the ship might be drilling holes in the hull. Her comments weren't vague. They weren't careful. They were the kind of sharp, deliberate criticism that comes from someone who's watched this league fight for every inch of progress, only to see that progress now threatened by ego, business ambition, and a complete breakdown of ethical boundaries. This isn't about whether rival leagues should exist. They do. They will. That's capitalism. That's choice. That's market evolution. What Bird is saying, loudly and clearly, is that when players with power inside the WNBA start building competing ventures while still holding roles of influence, that's not empowerment. That's sabotage dressed in. Take a closer look at the power structure right now. Union leaders, who are supposed to be negotiating better wages, benefits, and protections for players inside the WNBA, are also deeply involved in organizing rival leagues. Think about that. These are the same people who walk into bargaining meetings with the WNBA's front office, claiming to represent the interests of all players, while privately preparing to lure those same players away to a new business. Bird calls it a conflict of interest. Let's be blunt. It's a conflict of loyalty. And in a league that's still fighting for relevance, that kind of internal betrayal could be fatal. This isn't just theory. We're already seeing the ripple effect. Sponsors, media partners, and fans are starting to get confused. Where should they put their money? Their attention? Their trust? When a league's biggest stars are openly courting other platforms while still wearing WNBA jerseys, it creates noise. Too much noise. And that noise is clouding the brand that the WNBA has spent decades trying to clarify. The idea used to be simple. The WNBA is the top of the pyramid. You work your way up to this league. You arrive. You build your legacy here. Now, that hierarchy is crumbling, not because the game isn't good, but because the commitment from inside the league is fraying. Bird knows this firsthand. She came from an era when players didn't have multiple professional platforms, let alone the power to start their own. And yes, progress means options, but it also means accountability. And right now, there's none. Players are using their WNBA clout to build buzz for their rival leagues. They're using their league-issued credibility to promote new ventures that, by design, compete with the very structure that gave them that platform in the first place. That's not a side hustle. That's it in the league. So far, it's doing what too many sports leagues do in the face of internal dysfunction. Nothing. No statements. No rules. No lines in the sand. Just silence. Maybe out of fear. Maybe out of politics. Maybe out of the misguided hope that this will all blow over. It won't, because the longer this goes unaddressed, the more normalized it becomes. And the more normalized it becomes, the harder it will be to pull the league back from the edge. Sophie Cunningham Lexie, Sue Bird knows that, which is why she's not sugarcoating any of it. Her comment about Sophie Cunningham and Lexie weren't just about those two players. They were about a larger culture of double dealing that's creeping into the league like rot under fresh paint. It looks shiny on the surface, but underneath, it's hollowing out the foundation. And if someone as respected and measured as Sue Bird is ready to call for players to be removed from the league for their actions, that should tell you everything about how serious this is. She's not overreacting. She's responding to a crisis of values. Because you can't fix salaries, travel, working conditions, and branding if your core leadership is hedging its bets elsewhere. You can't build collective power when the people negotiating on behalf of the group are also laying the groundwork for an exit strategy. You either believe in the league you're leading, or you don't. And if you don't, that's fine. But you can't stay in a house while you're plotting to burn it down. What Bird is demanding isn't punishment, it's clarity. If you want to lead the WNBPA, then commit to the WNBA. If you want to start a rival league, go for it. But don't sit at both tables and pretend it's not a conflict. The league's future depends on people choosing their lane and staying in it. That's where this conversation has to go next. Structure, guidelines, boundaries. The WNBA and the union need to put rules in place. Real ones, not symbolic PR fluff. If you're holding a leadership position in the union, you should not be allowed to simultaneously invest in, run, or promote a competing league. Period. Because when trust is this fragile, even the appearance of betrayal can shatter everything. And it's not just internal chaos. It's economic chaos, too. When sponsors don't know who's really leading the league, when fans feel like players are checked out, when broadcasters hesitate to lock in long-term deals because the future feels unstable, that's how leagues lose momentum. Not through scandals, not through one bad season, but through doubt. Doubt is what kills brands. And right now, doubt is growing. Sue Bird doesn't want to see that happen. That's why she's speaking now. Before things hit the point of no return, before the league becomes a cautionary tale of what happens when leadership forgets who it's supposed to serve. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about ego. It's about the league. The WNBA can survive challenges. It can survive rival leagues. It can even survive slow financial growth. But what it cannot survive is betrayal from within. And unless the league draws a hard line right now, that betrayal will continue. Disguised as innovation, marketed as empowerment, and sold as evolution. It's not. It's erosion. And if no one else is going to say it, Sue Bird compilation. So now it's your turn. Do you think Sue Bird is right to call out these conflicts? Should players involved in rival leagues be allowed to lead inside the WNBA? Or is this just the new reality of sports and business? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if you think leadership should come with responsibility. And subscribe if you're here for every uncomfortable truth the headlines won't say out loud. Because what's happening in the WNBA right now isn't just about basketball. It's about power, loyalty, and what happens when the people in charge start playing for the other team.